AM 1460, the new WXBR. You were listening to the Metro South Morning Show. Peter Zimbor here with you on this Tuesday morning. This Saturday, live from Las Vegas, it's the rematch of the controversial 2012 welterweight title fight between Manny Pacquiao and Timothy Bradley. It will be broadcast live on HBO pay-per-view in the United States, and a part of the broadcast team for this event is HBO's unofficial ringside judge, Harold Lederman, who joins me right now via the telephone. Harold, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Harold, when Manny Pacquiao first met Timothy Bradley in the ring, a firestorm was set off shortly thereafter the announcement of the verdict of the fight. You and many ringside observers and many people watching at home had Pacquiao winning the fight in a landslide. However, when the official verdict was announced as a split decision win for Timothy Bradley, the whole world went crazy. Harold, in your opinion, what happened, and can it be explained?
Manny got robbed. I don't know. I mean, even the judge, Joey Roth, that had it for Pacquiao, only had it 115, 113 for Pacquiao, and Pacquiao won a lot bigger than that. I mean, you know, it was interesting. He set him up in the first 2 minutes of most of the rounds, and then in the third round, Manny Pacquiao would drill Timothy Bradley with that straight left hand. And, you know, Bradley wasn't moving. He complained that he had something wrong with his feet after the fight, that the shoes were bothering him. Something was bothering him, but he wasn't moving a heck of a lot, and Manny would just get him into the position he wanted him in, and he would just drill him with that straight left. And, you know, Timothy Bradley couldn't seem to block it. I mean, it was incredible how many really hard, good, straight left hands Pacquiao hit him with. And, you know, Manny sets up that left hand with his right jab. He's got that southpaw style that he's always turning, and, you know, he set up Bradley beautifully, and he just couldn't miss him. You know, most of them were headshots with that straight left hand down a pike, and he was winning those rounds clearly, and I mean clearly. That, you know, they weren't even controversial. They weren't even close. I mean, you know, Manny was just doing more damage. He would, you know, as I say, he'd maneuver him into the position where he wanted him, and then in the last minute of the round, and in virtually every round, he would just drill Bradley with that straight left hand. So, you know, it really wasn't much of a tough fight to score. I mean, in my mind, it was just, you know, a one-sided win for Manny Pacquiao.
Now, you scored the fight 119 to 109 on the HBO broadcast, which amounts to Pacquiao winning 11 of 12 rounds in the fight. The official scores for the fight, C.J. Ross and Dwayne Ford both had it for Bradley by a close margin, 115 to 113. And Jerry Roth, as you mentioned, had it via a close margin for Pacquiao, 115 to 113. Out of 55 ringside media members polled, 52 had it for Manny Pacquiao, and only 3 had it for Timothy Bradley. Amongst the 2 who had it for Bradley was Thomas Hauser, who now works with HBO, and Brian Kenny, formerly of ESPN, now works with Showtime on their boxing broadcast. Did you discuss with anyone who thought that Bradley won the fight why they thought Bradley won the fight, when seemingly it was the overwhelming opinion of everybody that was not the case?
No, not really. I mean, I see Thomas Hauser, you know, every now and then. Brian, I don't see much of. He works for Showtime. I don't see him that often. But, you know, I mean, what could you say? If that's how Thomas Hauser scored it, good for him. He's worked in Timothy Bradley's dressing room for this fight, by the way. You know, he'll go out there tomorrow, and he'll be in the Bradley camp and stay with Bradley until the fight's over, you know, and he'll be in his dressing room. And I guess he'll be not in the ring in the corner, but, you know, he'll be as close as he can get to Bradley, and, you know, he'll write a story based on his experiences with Timothy Bradley, I guess, sometime after the fight. But anyway, be as it may, if you go to some of the other well-known guys, Dan Rafael had it 11 to 1 Pacquiao. So, you know, among the press, there was, you know, pretty much big, you know, large agreement that Manny won the fight decisively.
A week later, following the fight, when one of the official judges, Dwayne Ford, appeared on the HBO show The Fight Game with Jim Lampley, he made a comment that he felt Timothy Bradley gave Manny Pacquiao a boxing lesson. I think collectively the boxing world just cringed. As a former judge and as HBO's unofficial ringside scorer, what was your response to that quote?
Nah, he was wrong. I mean, you know, when you're scoring, when you judge around this, it's who's doing more damage. I mean, it's that simple. Manny Pacquiao was just put Timothy Bradley, you know, as I said before, into the position where he wanted him by turning him, basically, you know. And Pacquiao's great at that. I mean, he turns you constantly. He goes one way, he goes the other way. If you want to hit him, you got to chase him. And, you know, you turn him into position, and then, as they say, basically the last half of the round, or the last minute of the round, he'd start to drill him with a straight left hand down a pike. And, you know, he landed so many straight left hands, it was a joke.
Well, the first fight in the books, we all know what it is, and it is what it is. Let's talk about the forthcoming rematch this Saturday on HBO pay-per-view. Let's talk about the circumstances going into this rematch, because they're slightly different than what they were just a few years ago when Pacquiao and Bradley met the first time. Both fighters have fought twice since they last met in the ring. Pacquiao getting starched by Juan Manuel Marquez and knocked out cold, and then returning with a unanimous decision win last year in China over Brandon Rios. Timothy Bradley, in his fight immediately following the Pacquiao bout, had a war with Ruslan Provodnikov, which he was able to win via decision, and then he won another close but convincing decision over Juan Manuel Marquez. Timothy Bradley enters this fight officially having the win in their first encounter, and now having a win over Juan Manuel Marquez, the man who just absolutely croaked Manny Pacquiao in their most recent meeting. Who has the advantage from a mental perspective heading into this Saturday's fight?
Yeah, well, in my estimation, it's Manny. I mean, you know, first of all, Manny came back, you know, really strong, I thought, with Brandon Rios. He won virtually every round in that fight. And, you know, he looked real good, you know. I mean, he was ahead in the Marquez fight, although not by much. At the time when he got knocked out, I think I had Pacquiao, you know, I had 1 point at the time of the knockout, 47-46. But, you know, it was a shot that, you know, it was freaky. You know, you never saw it coming. It was, I guess he heard the 10-second hammer, you know, they bang a hammer when there's 10 seconds left to go in a round so the referee can get close to the two fighters and try and get in between them so that, you know, nobody throws a punch after the bell. So anyway, he probably heard that 10-second warning, and you know, he was in a corner, so to speak, and Marquez caught him with an incredible shot right on the jaw. That could happen to anybody, you know. It was an odd knockout, and you know, it was the kind of punch that you know, you watch 100 fights, you probably wouldn't see it more than once, and you know, so Manny got knocked out. But to be honest with you, he handled Timothy Bradley so easily in the first fight. I don't think he's terribly scared that he's not going to be able to handle him in the second. Bradley is Bradley. You know, he's tough. He's a straight-ahead guy, likes to lean in like Evander Holyfield does. You always got to be wary of the fact that he may butt you. You know, he's got a terrific right hand over the top, and he's got a great jaw. I mean, we saw that in the Provodnikov fight. Ruslan Provodnikov is an animal. I mean, that's all there is to it. The guy is brutal. I mean, vicious, straight-ahead puncher. And, you know, some of the shots that he hit Timothy Bradley would have knocked out telephone poles, and yet Bradley was still standing after the Provodnikov fight, which was, as I say, was just a brutal fight. And, you know, so Timothy takes a terrific shot. He's got great heart, great determination, great resolve, you know. And, I mean, you hit him, but he bounces right back. I mean, it's incredible the kind of punch that he takes. But, you know, on the other hand, Manny's probably saying, hey, I didn't have much problem landing my left hand in the first fight. Ain't going to have much problem landing my left hand in the second fight, you know. So I think that, you know, mentally speaking, going into the fight, I think the advantage has got to be with Manny.
When asked about the outcome of the first encounter, Timothy Bradley has said that he watched the fight back and felt that he won it 8 rounds to 4. You chuckle at me saying that.
If he didn't know at the end of the fight before he watched it, he'll never know. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, do you think that's valid, or do you think that's him psyching himself up mentally heading into this rematch?
That's probably what he's doing, psyching himself up mentally, you know. But, you know, he's a tough guy. He doesn't need much psyching. This is a guy that gives you a great fight in every fight, win or lose, you know, and he's never lost. You know, he's going to come tough, but, you know, there's no doubt about it. I just don't see him needing to watch the first fight to, you know, to give him any motivation. I mean, this guy walks into the ring motivated, Bradley, and he trains like a son of a gun, and that's obvious, you know. Never tires, you know. He's always fresh in the 12th round, and he's, you know, he won't give up the 12th round. He ain't going to lose no decisions because he blew the last round. He's always in shape, and I mean, he trains as hard as he can possibly train, and that's why he does as good as he does, because for 12 rounds, he's going to hang in there tough with you. The thing is, can he handle the finesse, the style, the punching power of Manny Pacquiao? And we ain't going to know till after, the fight's over on Saturday night.
We're chatting with HBO's unofficial ringside boxing judge, Harold Lederman, here on WXBR. Harold, you mentioned a few moments ago that Pacquiao looked very good in his most recent fight against Brandon Rios, where he won a 12-round...
If you win every round, you can't look much better.
No, he looked very skillful in his boxing, won each and every round against Brandon Rios. And people like you and I, Harold, know that ever fighting above 130 pounds, Manny Pacquiao's resume was so impressive that he'd be a first-ballot Hall of Famer no matter what. But post 130 pounds, he had that run of just knocking guys out while jumping weight divisions and knocking out some big names and beating them definitively. That run of him knocking out David Diaz, Oscar De La Hoya, Ricky Hatton, and Miguel Cotto was as impressive as anything as many people have seen in boxing in recent years, and it really got Manny Pacquiao to be like a mythical-like feature within the lexicon of pop culture. Since then, decision when he wins fights. Has Pacquiao lost his killer instinct, or has he lost a step to a degree?
No, I mean, I don't think he's lost his killer instinct, and I don't think he's lost a step. I mean, the guy spends a lot of money, and he makes a lot of money, People accuse him, they were saying he had tax problems. I don't know if he's got tax problems. I know that he's got 13 guys in his room when I come to the fights. I mean, I don't hang around with him, but, I see the 13 guys hanging around with him. He's got Boo Boy and Bus Boy and whatever you call them guys, but, he's got all them guys in his room. I said to myself, Jesus, it must cost him a lot for all them airfares to bring all his buddies with him. But, he's a guy that seems to spend a lot of money, and, so I just think that he'll keep on fighting because he's a good fighter. I think that, the decisions, the decisions are there because the decisions are there. I mean, he maybe should have knocked out Brandon Rios. He certainly came close a couple of times. I mean, he hit Brandon Rios with everything but the referee and the stool, everything else he hit him with. But, sometimes it's not easy to catch a guy, like he caught Ricky Hatton on a jaw, or maybe it's not easy to catch Oscar De La Hoya the way he caught him. I mean, if anything, he's getting a little bit older. But I'll be honest with you, watching him, I don't know. I mean, I just don't see where he lost a step. I really don't, I think the guy's going to be around. I think that, he shouldn't go too high. I mean, saying that he won all those world titles and then keep moving up. I mean, you hit the bigger guys, and it takes a better punch than when you're 122 pounds or whatever. It's really very, very difficult to hit a guy at 147 if you're really a 126-pound fighter or a 130-pound fighter. So that's one thing you have to consider. Is he's all the way up to 147 already. But if he does get by Bradley, I mean, I could see a lot of interesting fights out there. I don't know, just off the top of my head, I'd love to see him fight Luis Carlos Abreu, for example, who's, in my mind, looked terrific every time I've seen him. I loved it when he knocked out Delorme. I thought he did a great job in Buenos Aires when he beat the Carry. And, he's a guy that people don't know that well because he fights most of his fights down in Argentina. But I'll tell you, he's certainly a tough guy and a good puncher. I mean, there's just a lot of opponents out there, and I'm taking into consideration that, that we'll still have the Golden Boy top-ranked nonsense. So, it might be a little bit difficult to, let's say, get the winner of Devin Alex, I was thinking more Paulie Malignaggi, and Sean Porter, that fight, or Devin Alexander, or any of the guys that, you see with Golden Boy or you see on Showtime. They get a lot of good welterweights. I mean, I'd love to see Pacquiao and Keith Thurman, for example, or Pacquiao and Roberto Guerrero. I mean, but, certainly there's a number of really good fighters available for Manny. I just hope the hell he doesn't have to make a mandatory against Juan Manuel Marquez. I don't want to see Juan Manuel Marquez Pacquiao 5. I've seen it 4 times already. I mean, 5 is just too much. And yet, now they're talking possibly who is it? The winner of Mike Alvarado and Juan Manuel Marquez becomes the mandatory, and that scares me. I don't want to see Pacquiao Marquez 5. If Marquez gets by Alvarado, and that ain't no given. Mike is a really, really tough guy. So it just the places that Manny can go, and I think he's still a good knockout puncher. I think he's got a little bit left, and I certainly look forward to some really good Manny Pacquiao fights down the road. Boy, would I love to see Manny fight the winner of Colasso and Mia Khan, but unfortunately, that's another fight where we get hung up with Top Rank and Golden Boy. I mean, that's all another story, but it's a shame.
And you mentioned potential fights for Manny Pacquiao after the Tim Bradley fight. Of course, he has to get by Tim Bradley this Saturday in Las Vegas before any of them could even potentially come to fruition. But it is amazing that we're 16 minutes into this interview, Harold, and the one name that we have not mentioned is Floyd Mayweather. Now, you alluded to there being political reasons why certain fights have not happened between Manny Pacquiao and other fighters from other promotional firms that he does not fight for. That's the case with with Floyd Mayweather. Do you think Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather will ever happen, or do you think the fact that it's 16 minutes into this interview and Floyd Mayweather's name makes its first appearance is just us reconciling with the fact that as boxing fans we've given up hope that it'll ever happen?
Yeah, I mean, everybody talked about seeing the fight before this thing went, before this thing started with Golden Boy and Top Rank. So, I mean, I sort of given up talking Pacquiao Mayweather already. I mean, Floyd is Floyd, great fighter. I don't want to start talking about Floyd Mayweather because he's Showtime's fighter, and it's really not correct for me to be talking about him. But he's a great fighter. He's certainly the number one guy in the world. I'd love to see the fight. I'm skeptical whether we'll ever see it. It just seems to, for one reason or another, never happen. I mean, I don't know. I don't get into HBO's business. They don't say, "Hey, Harold, come into the office and help us make fights." If they did, the first thing I do is call Floyd Mayweather. But as I say, I mean, I'm only a scorekeeper, and so it's hard to say. I just don't know, what they're considering buying in the future for Manny. I understand that he is in a mandatory position, and I understand that the mandatory will be the winner if Mike Alvarado won Manuel Marquez, much to my chagrin. But I'd love to see Floyd and Manny. It's a great fight, no doubt about that.
We're chatting with Harold Lederman here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. Manny Pacquiao takes on Timothy Bradley this Saturday night on HBO pay-per-view. Moving outside of the Pacquiao realm for a moment, Harold, outside of Manny Pacquiao fights, and outside of fights that cannot potentially be made due to business and political reasons, what is the best fights that could be made in boxing circa 2014 that can potentially be made?
Well, I mean, I like the little guys. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, we just don't seem to get the flyweights on HBO, and there's no doubt in my mind that that I want to see Roman Gonzalez, the Nicaraguan, on HBO. I mean, in my mind, that kid is nothing short of absolutely sensational. I'd love to see him with a guy that he beat, Juan Francisco Estrada. I'd love to see that fight. I'd love to see him with Yoka, the guy that's the champion at 108 that could move up to 112 where Gonzalez is now. There are just so many fights. Giovanni Segura. I don't know, Brian Valoria. I don't know, there's so many guys at 112 that I'd love to see Roman Gonzalez fight. When we used to do Michael Carbajal in the old days, we had great fights for Michael Carbajal and Chiquita Gonzalez, and of course a sensational fight between Michael Carbajal and Baby Jake Montwalla, which just goes to show that you can get sensational fights at 112 pounds. I mean, so I'd really look to see HBO get into that division because those guys are exciting, no doubt about that. I mean, we've been concentrating on light heavyweight fights. I don't know. Kovalev is a sensational fighter. I don't know if we'll ever get the Stevenson fight. I don't know if Stevenson's really interested in fighting Kovalev. he seems more interested in fighting Bernard Hopkins sooner or later, and it's a shame because I think Stevenson and Kovalev would have been a good fight, and I think Kovalev could have beat him, no doubt about it. I'd like to see Andre Ward move up to light heavyweight and fight Kovalev. I think that if Andre, gets over those arguments that he's been having with Dan Goossen and gets out of court, certainly I'd love to see Andre Ward go to 175 and take on Sergey Kovalev. I think the fight would be absolutely sensational. It's another fight I'd love to see. I'm looking forward very much to Julio Cesar Chavez and Gennady Golovkin if they fight in July. I think that they're close to making a fight. I think it would be an outstanding fight. And, it's a fight I'm really looking forward to, no doubt about that. I think that would be a great middleweight fight. I'm looking forward to Sergio Martinez putting this middleweight title on the line against Miguel Cotto. I think that there's a lot of talent in the middleweight division, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's a shame that we can't get Peter Quillen on HBO because I'd love to see Quillen fight one of those guys. No doubt about it. I mean, Peter's been doing real well, and I'd love to see him come back to HBO. It's a shame that he does fight for Showtime. I think Curtis Stevens put himself right back into the picture at middleweight on Saturday night with that sensational 10th round knockout in a fight that he was losing from here to tomorrow. Brings to mind that the heavyweight division's got a couple of new guys that are really, really interesting. I mean, I think Steve Cunningham was terrific the other night, and certainly I'm looking forward to Brian Jennings having a lot more good fights on HBO. So, there's a lot of good heavyweight fights out there. The winner of Areola Stavern should be a good fight with anybody. They'll probably have to do a mandatory against Wilder, but even still, I'd love to see the winner of Stavern and Areola come to HBO to take on some of the heavyweights that are available. Pulev, Glasscourt, the kid that just beat up Thomas Adamek. There's a lot of good heavyweights out there, and I'd love to see a few heavyweight fights after they decide who's going to be the WBC heavyweight champion. So, off the top of my head, that's about all I can think of.
Well, you mentioned Gennady Golovkin in there. I think he is the most exciting fighter in boxing on the rise. And you mentioned Andre Ward against Sergey Kovalev. I'd like to see Golovkin move up to 168 and fight Andre Ward if that's possible. That's at the top of my list.
It looks like he's going to 168. It looks like he's going to fight Julio Cesar Chavez. So, we'll see.
It'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out. Harold, before I let you go, and with our radio station signal emanating from Brockton, Massachusetts, I have to ask you this question. We are a few days removed from the 27th anniversary of the infamous 1987 middleweight championship fight between Sugar Ray Leonard and Brockton's own marvelous Marvin Hagler, a fight where the outcome is still debated on bar stools all over, particularly this region, till this day. Who did you have winning that fight, and what are your recollections of that fight between Hagler and Leonard?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a 115-113, 7-5 Sugar Ray Leonard. In my mind, there's no question that Leonard won the fight. Hagler definitely won the rounds where he took Leonard up on the ropes and hammered him, But as long as Ray stayed off the ropes and kept that fight in the middle of the ring, Marvin couldn't catch him. I mean, Ray was moving and jabbing and, landing nice combinations, and Marvin was looking to get him out of there with a good solid shot, but he missed it off a lot of punches in the middle of the ring, and Ray boxed beautifully. I think that in the third round, when Ray wound up his arm and hit Marvin with the other hand, and then Marvin went after him like a caged tiger and couldn't catch him, it frustrated Hagler, and I think Ray sort of took a psychological advantage at that point. I had all 12 rounds exactly the same as one of the judges, Dave Moretti from Las Vegas, who, interestingly enough, is working tomorrow night in the fight between Raimundo Beltran and Arash Usmani in the semifinal Saturday night on a Pacquiao Bradley pay-per-view. Anyway, Dave had it 115-113 Leonard, but he agreed with me in 12 out of 12 rounds. One of the other judges, Lou Filippo, who normally worked as a referee in California, they brought him to Vegas as a judge, and he gave it to Marvin. And the third judge was a guy named Jojo Guerra from Mexico, who was a boxing judge, but he was also a boxing commissioner down there. And he had it huge for Sugar Ray Leonard, but Sugar Ray Leonard didn't win it huge. It was a close fight. So, it was sort of sad for Marvin, because Marvin was a great middleweight champion, who I think only lost 3 fights in his entire life. He lost to Bobby Boogaloo Watts in a very questionable decision, and he lost to Willie the Worm Monroe but he beat Willie Monroe twice subsequently, and they fought 3 times. Marvin beat him 2 more times, including a second round knockout, which I was the judge at in Philadelphia. So, Marvin didn't lose many fights in a long career. I mean, he was an absolutely great fighter, but probably one of the greatest middleweight champions of all time, without doubt. But that night, I think Ray outboxed him. I just think it was a great comeback for Ray. Ray hadn't fought in 3 years or something like that. Came out of retirement to fight Hagler, and Ray boxed a beautiful fight. And I understand why Ray didn't want to fight him again, and I understand, Marvin's animosity towards Ray. I mean, Ray knew he couldn't beat him if they fought a second time. I mean, there was no way Ray was going to beat him because if they fought, once more, Marvin would have stayed right in his chest for 12 rounds and just hammered him to death. I mean, Marvin was tough, rough, and he could punch. So, I mean, I understand what happened after the fight, but that night I thought Ray Leonard boxed a beautiful fight because Ray Leonard was a sensational fighter, to say the least.
Well, it's ringside scoring analysis such as that you can hear Saturday night on HBO pay-per-view when Manny Pacquiao takes on Timothy Bradley in the rematch for the WBO Welterweight Championship. Harold, thank you so much for spending some time with me on the program this morning. I'll tell the folks listening that you and I did commentate a fight together one time in Poughkeepsie, New York. It was Nagy Aguilera versus Roderick Willis, and I was looking forward so much to saying at the end of the round, Harold, how'd you score that one? And Nagy Aguilera had to knock him out in the first round. So, Harold, you and I have to commentate a fight together sometime.
Love it, Peter. Thank you.
That's Harold Lederman joining us here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. We'll step aside. Mike Pava brings us a local news update. Stick with us.